It's 9 o'clock. I will call the meeting to order, special meeting of council to order. First item of business is adoption of the agenda. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by McDonald, that pursuant to Section 240 of the Municipal Act and Section 4.4 of Bylaw 04-2018 Township Procedural Bylaw, this special meeting of council be called for the purpose of discussing matters pertaining to the expressions of interest for the Zorra Municipal and Child Care Centre and tender information for a new custom cab pumper for Thamesford Fire Station, and that the agenda be adopted as printed and circulated. Are there any issues with the agenda? I'm going to suggest that since there's really two items on the agenda and one is significantly, I am anticipating going to have significantly more debate than the other, and the chief has other business to attend to this afternoon, could we move up the pumper truck item ahead of the Zorra Municipal Center and do it that way if everybody's agreeable? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And 5.2 Fire Department. From the fire chief regarding results of tender for new custom cab pumper for Thamesford Station. Chief, over to you.
Morning, everyone. I don't know that there's a ton to highlight outside.
Chief, I forgot. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Seeing none. Sorry.
Good morning again. Not a ton to highlight outside of what I've tried to capture in the report in terms of the process that we've taken to get toward this recommendation. Really interesting times trying to tender a truck at this point, and thankful that we had a purchasing policy that allowed us to open up and look at some other options and find a truck that I think will absolutely meet the needs of the Township of Zorra and the Thamesford Station moving forward.
Questions from council for the chief? Paul.
Two-part question. Where's this truck built, and where's the closest service for this company, sir?
So this truck is currently in production, which has been one of the ways that we can have quite a large cost savings to it. It's being built in Florida, and it will be serviced quite local, actually just in air, which is a bonus to not have to take this truck far in the event that it needs to be looked at.
Any other questions for the chief on this report? Not seeing any. I have moved by Mitchell, seconded by McDonald, that report number 2022-120 entitled Results of Tender for New Custom Cab Pumper for Thamesford Station be received for information, and that staff be directed to enter into an agreement of purchase with 1200 Degree Darch Fire for a 2023 custom cab pumper, and that staff be directed to sell the old pumper apparatus as per normal selling procedures for township vehicles. Paul, did you want to speak to that?
A couple of disappointing things about this report. First of all, is that we're not going to purchase a metal fab truck, and I'm partial to metal fab, partly because they have proven to be the best fire trucks that we've had in the township over many, many years. They're Canadian made, based in New Brunswick, and they're an excellent company to deal with as far as servicing and going on. The other thing I'm disappointed about this report is that I think this is the first time we won't be buying a custom built truck, and we've always taken pride that we've bought custom built trucks because each of our halls has unique needs, and we've been able to design the trucks to fit those needs. But on the other hand, at 125% over the minimum what we budgeted for it, we're looking at somewhere over $800,000 for a truck that we budgeted $650,000 for. And my compliments to the chief and the other people involved in this. This is not the best alternative, but given those kind of dollars, it's the best alternative. It's the kind of compromise that we have to make to get a new truck within a reasonable price range. And I don't think this is going to be the last time that we have to make a compromise on a major purchase to get what we need without blowing the budget. So much as I would like to see a custom built metal fab, this is the best alternative, so that's why I'm supporting that we go ahead and purchase this truck.
Anybody else want to speak to it? I will read it again and call the question. Moved by Mitchell, seconded by McDonald. that report number 2022-120 entitled Results of Tender for New Custom Cab Pumper for Thamesford Fire Station be received for information, and that staff be directed to enter into an agreement of purchase with 1200 Degree Dart Fire for a 2023 custom cab pumper, and that staff be directed to sell the old pumper apparatus as per normal selling procedures for township vehicles. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Chief. And 5.1, Corporate Services Department, Report 2022-131 from the Chief Administrative Officer regarding Zorra Municipal Center request for expressions of interest. 2022-131 Zorra Municipal Center request for expressions. Dawn, is there anything you want to highlight for council before I ask them for their many, many questions?
No, the only thing I did pass out a revised spreadsheet today. We will make sure that that's posted on the agenda so that the public is aware of what was passed out. No, I think I would leave it open for questions from council, other than to say that, I think staff would be willing to proceed with a revised floor plan for this building that is substantially smaller than what was initially proposed at the 23,700. We worked on a new floor plan that's about a little under 20,000 square feet, and I think it's something that we would be comfortable with. A few things were dropped out of that, but it's something that we still feel would be a 40-year building that would meet our future staffing demands. Given the way that the workforce is going now with what we have in our offices, we were able to shrink the offices down from where they traditionally would have been, way larger because of the equipment required in each office. We're now sitting at a spot that I think is fairly standard for what we're seeing industry-wide now. So in talking with both firms that were the low bidders, they are both confirmed that a 10 by 11 office is more than adequate for today's needs.
Questions for Dawn? Paul?
You're right on the many, many questions part, Marcus, and we've played the script before. I've sent these questions to Don, and he answered most of them as best he could, but I'd like to go through them for the benefit of the rest of council and anybody that's watching this meeting. Don, in the Paulson submission on what is page 32 of our agenda, there's a list of exclusions, of things that are not included in this quote, so I'd just like to touch on that for a minute or two. Item number 9 on that list is daycare equipment. So how is the daycare equipment going to be funded?
The majority of the equipment for the daycare is going to be funded through Oxford County. So once we have the final bids in to see what's in the tender, we'll then bring that to the county to see what they would consider equipment. And hopefully, it might even get down to little things like toilets or some of the cabinetry that we would consider not capital, and they would fund that.
Is there an upper limit on that funding?
I believe it's 450,000 is what the county has said they would fund.
So a significant contribution towards the
Yes, definitely.
above and beyond the building cost.
Yes,
Okay.
and that would also outfit the playgrounds. There's 2 playgrounds that would be required as part of the project.
Right.
One
Okay.
for preschool and one for toddlers and infants. So
Okay.
we would need to make sure that those are outfitted properly.
It's good to know. Item 10 on that list was removal of contaminated soil. So are we 100% sure that there's no contamination at 145 Brock?
Yes, we are. Yes, it was confirmed through environmental testing by Kingwood's consultant, the one that's doing the work for us on Commissioner Street in Embro. They've tested the site. The area that we would be swapping with Kingwood is virtually excavated to the extent of the limits that we would need, so anything that's there is gone.
Okay, that's good to know too. So the other things in the list, those are going to be the nickel and dime things, 5,000 here, 20,000 there. Do we have an estimate of what that potentially could add up to on top of the building cost?
No.
We're going to be,
No.
okay. Thank you.
Anybody else before Paul goes ahead? No? Go ahead, Paul.
Is the building completely electric, or is there any natural gas in it?
The only item that we haven't determined yet is the generator type. There's arguments that can be made for natural gas or diesel. Both are non-renewable. Given where we are located, a natural gas generator would likely be quieter and smaller. So we may look at that option compared to a diesel generator, but the Paul Sand bid did provide an estimate of $50,000 for a generator, which would only be, it wouldn't allow us to operate the building fully. That's for certain. It would just be more for emergency use.
Okay.
Have we considered battery backup?
Not yet, no.
Okay.
I just want to clarify, because I've been confused, and I think I've got it figured out now, but the actual ownership of these two lots, we bought 121 acres from Maple Leaf. We broke it up into a whole bunch of different lots, and we sold the bulk of it to Kingwood, but we did not sell the technical service building property.
Correct.
That's correct. We did sell 145 Brock.
Yes, that was part of the, one of the blocks, the industrial blocks that was sold to Kingwood.
Okay, so in this potential land swap, is there any, other than, in order to go forward with the land swap, we need to demolish the technical services building? Do we have any other commitments to demolish anything or to build anything if we decide not to go ahead with building the ZMC project?
No, there's no other commitments.
So if we decide not to do anything, we would be left with the technical services building as it is, and then we could decide what to do with it.
Correct.
Whether sell it or demolish it or what to do after that.
Correct.
So at the end, no matter what we do, we're going to be end up with a piece of property of approximately 2 acres.
That's correct.
Okay. And my last question is, in the design of the daycare center, was the YMC people involved? We haven't awarded it yet, but they were the preferred tender for providing the daycare. Did they have input in the design of that facility?
Yes, they've looked at the design from the get-go, and any revisions that were made during the expression of interest process were included from comments that the Y provided.
Okay, good.
So just so council's aware, the licensing process for childcares, once our floor plan is decided, we would then consult with the Ministry of Education, and they would have a kick at it too. So there may be some revisions based on their comments, but both the low bidders have both built childcare centers, so they have a pretty good idea of what the ministry's after in the design of these buildings. So I think we're fairly close. There may be some minor changes, but other than that, I think we're good with the floor plan from the childcare centers.
Okay, thanks, John. That's it for my question.
So I guess, for me, just to follow up on, I think we were asking the question of battery groups, if, council decides that we were using solar on our generating electricity, storing, that how much is being stored, generator, I don't know technical details of that, but I think we were asking the question of whether still have a question mark whether we'll do a generator in batteries cheaper, I don't. I guess that's one of the questions I have. Anybody else? Katie?
Can I just ask a question of clarification in relation to the life cycle costing for our existing office, the new office, and new office without solar?
Yep.
So, sorry, I didn't have this to you ahead of time.
No, that's fine.
So I'm looking at, so we're going out 30 years here, correct?
Correct.
So in the 30-year costing for projections for new with or without solar, there's a $814,000 difference in our 30-year costing. $814,000 of cost savings if we are generating our own electricity through solar.
Correct.
So when I'm looking at the year over year, so there's an extra 9,500 costing on that first year. I haven't gone out very far with it, though, where going with solar is going to cost us an extra $9,000 to $10,000 a year as we're going. But once we get out to our 30-year cost saving, or our 30-year life cycle, I'm doing, so what I did for math was the $814,000 divided by 30 years for an average cost savings per year. I'm looking at $27,147. Does that sound, like, I'm just wanting to make sure my math is correct here, because it looks like to go solar, we're paying more money to have that solar, but in the long run, we're actually saving approximately $18,000 a year if we went solar.
That's our best guess estimate based on looking at our other buildings to see what our electricity costs are now. We don't know what those costs are going to be in the future, but we can all safely assume that those costs are going to go up, and probably go up substantially, based on the fact that some of our electricity costs are now funded from the taxpayers, not through rates.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to pull out, like, there's cost to do solar, there's cost savings if you have solar in place, but where are we generally ending up? And I understand there's a lot of factors in play that would make it difficult to nail it right down, but just in the general direction of my understanding is, okay, thank you.
Just a couple of comments regarding the generator, the backup, the solar. In my mind, Zorra Township's made a commitment to solar in a lot of buildings already, and I think we should continue with that. I think there's technology out there, I'm pretty certain, that would allow us to have solar panels on the roof, battery backup, so we don't even need a generator, right? So that even though a gas-powered generator is $50,000, is pretty cheap in the scheme of things, down the road, I think the more reliable technology is going to be battery backup, fed off of our own solar panels, and it works basically just like a transfer switch for a generator. So I think we should explore that a little bit. I wouldn't rule out having the solar panels, because hydro's going up, the cost of maintaining our provincial grid's going to go up. That bill's just getting bigger every day. So in my mind, that's something that we originally planned to put in the building, and I don't like the idea of taking it out. So that's just my comment on that part.
Question on, it's a sort of a bit of a related to Katie's one. If I look at the sheet here that has ZMC new and ZMC new, no solar, if I'm understanding it correctly, then all in, construction cost, operating cost, financing costs, at the end of the 30 years of this spreadsheet, notwithstanding that I think the building's, safe to say the building's gonna last more than 30 years, the total costs with solar, let's say 1.8 million, the total cost without solar, 2.6 million. So I think, I'm rounding there, but I think reasonably. So I think if I'm reading that correctly, then it's saying that at 30 years, all-in cost, additional construction cost and financing for the solar, but utility savings, to build it without solar over 30 years costs an extra $800,000. Is that correct?
Correct. It lessens our upfront cost, that's all it does.
Taking solar out.
Correct.
Right, it lessens the year zero costs of construction, and it lessens, I guess, the financing of it until it's paid off.
Exactly.
But there's no savings in electricity at any point.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you, I just wanted to clarify that. Anybody else? Questions? Ron?
Just another comment as well. Although Don's got a very long spreadsheet here going out a number of years, nobody could have predicted the last 3 years. So I'm not sure why we spend a lot of time concentrating on 40 years out or 50 years out.
Anyone else? Paul?
No more questions, but I've got quite a few comments, so.
Well, I mean, we can do questions as well as comments once I read the motion, but if there's straight up just questions, I'd rather take those now, then I'll
Yeah,
read the motion.
if anybody else has got more questions, I'll hold my comments.
I just have one more question. So I understand from the report what we thought we could do with some shared spaces, then building code, was it building code?
Yes.
Building code determined there has to be that firewall between separating the two functions, and with that, then we had to duplicate some of our things that we had hoped we'd be able to overlap and share. My question is, where in the process did we then determine that? Like, what caught that, and is there any potential for any other design challenges to come up, or has this now gone through enough of a process that hopefully anything significant like what has been found here should all be kind of surfaced now?
When I spoke with Paulson, they've done their own building code review on it, so that was, how they captured that. When I spoke with Sierra, they were aware of that fire sup requirement as well. So unless there's other items that come out, I think we should be fairly safe from any other major items, because it's slab on grade too. It's a fairly simple building. It's not too complicated like our maintenance center.
Any other questions before I read the motion? To clarify, you can't ask a question when we enter in debate, but yeah, it's best if we hold straight up comments until after. We're good? Moved by Forbes, seconded by Gregg, that the CAO be instructed to obtain revised cost estimates for Zorra Municipal Center based on square footage not to exceed 20,000 square feet, and to return those revised costs for the August 17 meeting. Ron, as the mover, do you want to speak to that?
No, I just think Don's explained this well this morning. We got a couple of good bids. I don't know. I'm having trouble saying how it's good when, 3 years ago it was $3 million. So, anyways, I think we're into this to a point now. We got to get some more information. If Don thinks he can go back and get a little benefit on those bids, then let's do it.
Katie is the seconder. Do you want to speak to it?
Yeah. Like Ron was just saying, a few years ago what this would have cost versus now, I'm definitely feeling the time pressure of getting this done while it's still within reason. But this is, another hurdle that this project has come up against, and it's not the first one, but it's pretty significant, and hopefully we're not seeing anything this significant moving forwards. I'm happy with that motion to see that request for information come back at our next council meeting so that we're able to proceed with this. Walking into this building and seeing people working out of every corner, I'm same with ZMF. Staff made it work for as long as possible, and we had to get that building done right. And the same thing is happening here with our office. We're bursting at the seams. And then I'm also feeling a bit the pressure for the daycare facilities. I get phone calls weekly from people who are moving into the community and looking for where they can possibly access childcare so that they're able to go to work. So this is, feels like another slowdown, another bit of a holdup, but I think what we're asking for here is the responsible information, and Don will be able to continue chipping away at this and bringing it back to us and hopefully get this project moving forwards.
Anyone else? Paul?
Report was excellent, and I'm going, there's a lot of guessing in there and estimating, but there's a few definitives that are stamped in concrete. We are going to need a new building sooner or later, or at least expand something. And it's only going to get more expensive down the road. And we learned that with the Works Department building. And watch it go from one price up $4 or $5 million, but that was just time we let slip by. So, yeah, get more definitive, see if we can chip them down a little bit. I'm all for it.
Paul?
My comments are going to take a little longer, but in preparation for this this meeting, I went back and I reread every report that's been given us and the presentations that were made about this proposal. And I came up with two lists, mainly so that I could decide in my own mind the value of going forward with this project. And the two lists are reasons that we should build the ZMC and reasons not to build the ZMC. So I'll start with the reasons not to build. It's the shorter list. Reason number one, it's bad timing. Too much, too fast. In the last 8 years, the Township of Zorra has built the largest and fanciest fire hall in all of Oxford County and surrounding areas. And I've been in all of them except the two newest in Burgessville and Beachville, and nothing comes close to the Thamesford Fire Hall. We're still building a public works facility that's state-of-the-art, and we included a green energy option in that, which, when you looked at the life cycle cost of that facility, makes sense. But the break-even on that is several decades down the road. And it is adding somewhere between $1.5 and $2 million to the upfront construction cost and the debt load associated with that facility. And one of the reasons I supported going green energy and the extra cost was that I didn't see any other major infrastructure being built in the near future. And I remember Ron saying, don't be so sure about that. And he was right, because 6 months later, we have this new proposal come before us. So to add another roughly $6 to $7 million project onto what we've already done in the last 8 years means that a little township of less than 9,000 people is going to be spending close to $20 million on three major infrastructure projects. Reason number two ties in with that because of those projects and because we're still paying off money that was borrowed for the sewage work in Thamesford and Embro. We have a significant amount of long-term debt. And the long-term debt payment in 2023 is a little over $1.3 million. The long-term payment in 2028 is $656,000 because that sewage debt will be paid off by then. So in 5 years' time, our annual long-term debt payment will be about half what it will be next year. So there's an argument to be made that we don't build any more infrastructure of this type or take on more debt for another 5 years. Reason number three is it's debatable whether we need a new building at this time. The report on the current township offices says that the building is structurally sound and well maintained, but needs a new parking lot. There's several points in the reports that the building is overcrowded, and I would agree for 3 days a week with the number of staff that we've hired, it is overcrowded here. But there's other options to deal with that aren't going to cost millions of dollars. The report says that it lacks some amenities such as a mayor's office, a meeting room, and etc. And I would propose that for a township our size, those are more wants than needs. It says that it's not AODA compliant, and AODA compliancy would be ideal, I agree, but it's not required unless we do major renovations or a new build. And when we looked at a new office, municipal building as part of the ZMF, we were assured that staff could overcome any issues with AODA. And lastly, it's in a poor location. It's not accessible to residents. Well, it's been in a poor location for 45 years, so I don't see any rush to build a new building for that reason. The other proposal used for this facility is the child care facility, and I question what is the role of municipal government, because I believe in small government, I believe in personal responsibility, I believe that parents are best suited to raise kids in almost all cases. And I don't believe that the role of government is to provide cradle to grave for residents. And I think we have to be very careful when we expand into new services, especially if those services are not available to all citizens and because of location and because of the demographics that will benefit it. On the other hand, of the side of the ledger, the reasons to build the ZMC. Reason number one, childcare is needed in Zorra Township. Two-income families are a reality and necessity for a couple of reasons. First, for the individual, the high cost of living requires two-income families in almost all cases. It also is a benefit to society because we have a huge labor shortage right now. So if we can have more caregivers in the workforce and potentially have more people born who are going to be labored down the road, that's a benefit to society. We wouldn't be increasing township staff or our responsibilities. We're simply providing the facility and would be acting as landlords, and we would collecting a rent of $50,000 a year to start with, and then it is the contract is based on inflation, so that money would offset the operating cost. Reason number two, township will need a new township office eventually and address the shortcomings that I just mentioned. And though I downplay them, they definitely are shortcomings. And it makes sense that there's cost savings to construction and operation to combine municipal offices with a child care facility. As Steve mentioned, we are in a time of high inflation, so the cost of constructions is not going to come down. It's going to go up dramatically in the next 5 years, and it will probably outstrip any investment that we would have by putting money away towards new buildings. While the location isn't better geographically as far as location in the township, it does bring the township offices closer to the largest village in the town, a place that will have probably 40% or more of the population in the near future. And sale of the current municipal offices property is a key part of the funding of the ZMC project. Reason number three, it's the best use of funds generated by the township property sales. And so we've, between the profits from the big sale to Kingwood of the Maple Leaf property, the extra sales from 131, 149 Brock, 113 Brock, and the former fire hall, we have generated about $3.5 million, which we have now, or will have very soon. And that's because we got lucky. It was a combination of good luck and good management. We were selling into a red-hot real estate market, and council and staff both made some good decisions about how to market those properties to maximize our return. Now, some people would say that there's other uses for that money, and the question I often get is, when are you going to pave my gravel road? And to be quite honest, $3.5 million isn't going to pave very much road, because the cost of turning a gravel road into a paved road is not the pavement, it's all the underwork that needs to be done, the redesigning of the ditches so that the water flows properly and all those things. So $3.5 million is not going to get far on paving roads. The other argument is we should use it to reduce taxes or reduce tax increases. But using funds from sales of assets to offset operating costs is not good fiscal management, because what you end up with is eventually you don't have the asset that you sold, you don't have the asset you could have built, and you used up all your money. Reason number four, upper government funding. We have been approved for a grant of $750,000, and as Don mentioned a few minutes ago, potentially up to $450,000 to equip the child care. If we don't go forward with this project, that money will be lost, over $1 million potentially coming to Zorra Township. And I've argued in the past that we shouldn't use grant money on projects that are questionable, because there's only one taxpayer. But this project does have merit, and the money's going to be spent somewhere. If we don't take it, some other municipality will. Reason number five, this is the best plan that we've considered. We looked at renovating part of the technical services building. We looked at renovating all the technical service building and becoming a landlord to use up the extra space. Both of those have, in my mind, very high risk, both to construction and operation. We talked to Kingwood of possibly them doing the renovation and we leasing our office space from them. That's lower risk, but it also gives us very little control over our property. This is a new build, which means that we can build exactly what we want, design it exactly without compromises, other than compromises for price. It's in a better location on 145 Brock, so it's on an existing street. It's not out in the middle of land that will be under development for years to come. It's much lower risk than renovating, and with only one tenant, which would be the child care, we have much less chance of conflict which we would have with multiple tenants. The original concept for the office has been downsized, but it still provides the what we need for the foreseeable future. And my last reason to build it is relatively cheap land. And we all know that building projects have two components, cost of construction and cost of land. 145 Brock Street is 87,000 square feet, almost exactly 2 acres. We purchased 121 acres of land from Maple Leaf Foods for $5,960,000, which comes under just a little under $50,000 per acre. We sold 112 acres to Kingwood in the big sale for $7 million, which works out to $62,500 an acre, or a profit of $12,500 per acre on that sale alone. So what that land has cost us, whether we assign this to 145 Brock or to the technical service property, doesn't matter, because those two properties are interchangeable at this point, that we potentially could swap them, is the $100,000 that we paid for the 2 acres from Maple Leaf Foods. The $25,000 that we've lost in reselling it, and the $468,000 for demolition of the technical services building, which is a requirement of swapping the land with 145. So that's about $600,000 for those 2 acres to put this building on, which sounds like a lot of money until you compare it to what we got for 149 and 131 Brock. Kingwood paid us $1.8 million for that property, and that was 92,000 square feet, so almost exactly the same size. So if you look at it from that perspective, this property's costing us $600,000, but it's worth 1.8. That's what Kingwood set the market price at. So we're getting the land to build this on at least $1 million to $1.2 million under market value. That's my 6 reasons to build it. At this point, I was going to announce how I was going to vote, but since that would be premature. 2 comments, because we're looking for more numbers, construction numbers, and those numbers are going to impact how much money we need to borrow, and that's going to impact what the 30-year life cycle costs are going to be. And that, in spite of Ron's, I know when you get out 30 years, your numbers can, but that is what I really look at. What is this project going to cost us over the whole lifetime of it? And 2 comments to finish off. I support the motion because we can find out more information without tipping our hand. That was my concern. And the other thing is, I'm hesitant to support going forward with this unless we delay putting in the solar panels until 2028. And my reasoning for that is that, as I said earlier, our debt load will be much lower at that time. So the $350,000, we can save that up front. That's less money we have to borrow now. And in 5 years' time, we can either pay for the solar panels out of that savings, the $500,000 savings, or we can borrow money for a shorter time span than we can afford to now, and that would lower the overall cost. And the other thing is, in 5 years' time, we will know exactly how much electricity we'll need to operate this building. what we found from the ZMF, the estimates on need and generation of green energy electricity is at best a calculation that can be significantly off. In 5 years' time, solar panels hopefully are cheaper. And I just heard yesterday that almost all solar panels, or the components, are built in China. So hopefully in 5 years' time we can install Canadian solar panels that are more efficient than what we have now. And I'll use the same argument that I used in the ZMF going longer financing, that the people, the future taxpayers, should pay larger contributions toward this than the people right now, because they're the ones that are going to benefit the most for this. And it's only a 5-year delay, but I would like to see that. So as usual, thank you for letting me go on and on and on, but I had a lot of points I wanted to make again. I've really kicked this around a lot, and this is the information I gathered, and hopefully it's of some benefit to the rest of council and to anybody listening. So I'm going to shut up now. Thanks.
Anyone else? Katie?
As always, I appreciate the work that Paul's dug into and sort of laying out for us how he's arrived to where he thought he was going to vote, but he just made a couple of statements. I think, some of the pros and cons for building this or not building this, it's interesting to hear the perspectives from the other members of council. I just had a couple really quick comments, and I don't think that they impact the outcome of this debate, but I just think it's important when we're having public discussions that when positions are taken by certain members of council that those are reflective of that member of council and not necessarily council as a whole. I think when I'm looking at this project and whether or not we're proceeding with it, in my mind we are proceeding with it. And there's just a couple of pieces in there relating to location and how we don't have great location now, so the improved location, we've already had this. I think what we're seeing with the development in Thamesford, having apartments coming in, more variety of housing, more densification, there's excellent opportunity there's already some public transit that is stopping in Thamesford, and that is only likely to increase as time goes on. So that location, well, in the past we've been comfortable with this being in a less than ideal location. I think the benefits of having a more ideal location are only going to increase as the changes happen within the municipality. The AODA compliance concerns, I read the same original reports. The discussions we had about whether or not we need to build this building from 1 or 2 or 3 years ago. I think the discussions are going to change and things are evolving. We may not be required to address concerns unless we have major renovations, but I look at that as loopholes if we want to dodge our responsibility to properly serve every member of our community. So when we have this opportunity to build a more welcoming building for the function of every resident, then that is 100% what I will be interested and committed to. And then the last one, which is a little bit of a chip on my shoulder, parents are best to raise children. I stayed home and raised 2 of my children. And my third is in daycare right now, while I get to come sit here and be a part of these discussions and make these decisions. I get to be the one member of this council that just looks a little bit different than the rest because I have access to daycare, and I barely got that daycare, and it is only part-time when I would love to have full-time. So I think there are definitely wonderful things about raising your own children as a parent, but realistically, most families who have a parent who stays home, it's the woman, it's the mother. That is more common, and while cost of living increases, means that two-income households are important, and that those children are, our future workforce. The other side of the benefit of having two working members of a household is that we then have a workforce that looks more diverse and is more likely to have more variety of people in all areas of work, including hopefully in leadership roles. So I appreciate the comments of my colleague here, but I couldn't let that go without throwing in my 2 cents. I feel like it's important for me, especially as a woman sitting in this chair, that when we're having conversations like this, that those who are watching at home don't hear that and think that maybe that, this space is not for them.
Anyone else?
Just very quick, and when I that's the reason I went through my list of reasons not first, because those were my gut reactions and has been my gut reaction throughout this process why we shouldn't do this. But in my reasons, and when I mentioned about the daycare and that I didn't look in your direction on purpose, but in my list of reasons to build it, I agree totally with what you said, that this is reality. And despite my old-fashioned beliefs on some things, reality trumps what happened before, and this is what we need to deal with. So, I have no argument with anything you said, Katie, and I have no problem with you clarifying that those were my comments and not council's comments. But I do agree that daycare is something that needs to be done, and this is a good way to do it.
Anyone else? Katie?
And I think in terms of the solar and the financing and costing, I'm not commenting on that because I'd like to go away and have a closer look at some of the ideas that you've suggested about financing it. I am, the solar component to me needs to be right out of the gate, but you've raised some interesting points here, so I'll be digging into that a little bit more before we come back on the 17th.
Anyone else? I have a question before my comments. First question, I guess, is the motion says that to return those revised costs for the August 17 meeting. So if we get that on August 17th, in order to meet the timing, because I think, if I'm correct, the $750,000 grant is predicated on us spending $1 million by March something?
March 31st.
March 31st. Right. So would council need to make a decision as to proceed on this in order for that to happen, I guess, is my question.
Yes.
Thank you.
And also the lame duck provisions that may or may not be enforced depending on what happens on the 19th.
Okay, so I asked that question to frame it for council that, whatever comes back, I think we need to be making a decision on August 17th. I guess then my comments would be, and my opinion is we should absolutely be deciding to proceed with this. Because if we're not proceeding with it and that grant goes away, that means any idea we come up with has to be a minimum of $750,000 better than that. I don't personally see that. Any decision we make here is always imperfect, right? So the question then is, well, how imperfect is it? How much more effort do you put into making it less imperfect? And I think $750,000 out of the gate, I don't see it happening here. I think you made an exhausted list there, Paul, of all the options that this council has considered of how to address this issue. And I think you made the point clearly that at the end of the day, this is the best option that's in front of us. So I think at this point, to me, it's sort out those details and then let's proceed with this. I largely agree with all the comments that council has made. I would put a slightly different lens on some of it and point out that I think we need to keep, and I know I keep banging on this drum about assets all the time, but I think it's a crucial mindset for us to change, and that is we tend to focus as individuals and as councillors and as municipal governments on upfront and purchase prices of items. But the reality is that the upfront purchase price of this building, whether it's whatever it is in the end, we'll find out on August 17th, is only a portion of it. And it also is, it's a new asset with a new purchase price, but it is replacing an aging asset that will have future costs. So the real question is, over the life of those assets, the existing aging asset or the new asset, what is the cost to the taxpayer? That's the real question, not the upfront cost. You know, in an agricultural community, our neighbors all know this, right? They know that at a certain point, I mean, you can put a new roof on that barn, you can put a new liner in that manure pit, but at a certain point, it makes more sense to say, you know what, let's get a loan, let's, you know, invest, and let's have a more modern facility, and over the life of my business, not us as an individual, but our business, that will make more financial sense. I think this is an absolute and clear example of that. To me, we're looking at an $800,000 savings over 30 plus years to get the solar in. We're looking at $600,000 over 30 years to get the childcare. I agree with Paul that that we need to be wary of what is and isn't a municipal responsibility, and ideally childcare would be a service that would be provided by the market, but it's not. And when it's not, and it's a constraint on people living their lives, it's a constraint on people, you know, contributing to the economy, it's a constraint on businesses. The number one complaint right now from businesses in Oxford County and Zorra Township is there isn't enough staff, and one of the main reasons for that is unavailability of childcare. Second, of course, is housing. I certainly don't think it's my position as a politician to say to anybody who would be best to raise their children, but it is a service that is in demand. And in the 2022 budget survey that the county did in partnership with the area municipalities, it was one of the areas that residents specifically said that they wanted their municipal government to spend more money on was childcare. So to me, I think this is an excellent proposal in front of us. Frankly, I'm kind of in the same place as Paul. I'm kind of ready to just go now. I would be quite comfortable saying take some value out of it and just go. But if we have the time to August 17th, and that's what council wants to do, then I think that's reasonable to do. But to me, I would be just comfortable saying, bring it down to 20,000 square feet and make the deal and get this thing going. I think the last thing I would say is on the solar, to me, it has to have the solar right out of the gate. Maybe in a few years, solar will be made in Canada. Maybe it won't. Maybe solar will be cheaper in a few years. Maybe it won't. I think with the inflation rate we're seeing now and inflation probably higher on construction projects, to me in 2, 3, 5 years, it could easily, even if the price of the solar panels themselves comes down, the overall cost to put them on the roof could be the same or higher. And we're not then incurring the savings of having our own electricity and maybe then having to invest in a generator that then once we get the solar, we don't actually need. To me, and again, as Ron said, we've made the commitment to the solar. So on the 17th, I will not be supporting proceeding with this building without the solar on the roof. I think it's the right thing to do. And I guess that was the second last thing, I guess, because the last thing I would say is I think we do need to be aware of, you know, current and future taxpayer and who's paying, but I don't think that anybody should pay more. And for us to defer that cost so that the future taxpayer pays a little bit more would actually mean that everybody's just going to pay more. We could, in fact, just build a cheaper building over 30 years by just doing it right away. Yeah, that's cheaper for everybody. I'm not willing to just spend less now to make them pay more later for it to be fairer when it actually just means everybody's going to pay more. To me, I would just say, whatever's the cheapest over the 30 years, let's build that. And let's remember that in the context of an asset, that means that a future council, you know, we've all experienced this where we get the budget from staff, and the reality is 95% of that budget is fixed already. And the reality is that most of that is because of the stuff that we own. We own things, right? We own roads, we own bridges, we own buildings, and we have to maintain them. What are you going to do? It needs a new roof. What are you going to do? You're going to put a roof on it. So we're going to beat up staff to find the best price they can for the roof, but we're going to put the roof on. There's no not putting the roof on. We could delay it a year, but you're still going to put the roof on. This is the decision now that hands that budget to the council 20 years from now and says, here's your asset to manage. You've got this now. You've got this ZMC thing that a bunch of yahoos in 2022 decided to build. And what we should be saying to that council 20 years from now is, did that council hand them 20 years ago the best asset that we could possibly hand them? And I think that the best asset we could possibly hand them is one, as Ron said, that is independent of whatever is going on with electricity costs in the province. And say, you own this building, your electricity costs are yours and yours alone to manage. It's the cheapest over 30 plus years that could have been built for the current future taxpayer. So again, I'd be comfortable giving direction to staff to say, take it down to 20,000 square feet and do the deal. But if council wants to have it back for August 17th and get the information and then make that decision, I'm comfortable with that as well. But I think as Paul made it clear, we've explored literally every option and options within those options. I think we're there. And I think we need to get this done for a whole lot of reasons that you guys have made clear in your comments. So I'm done at that point. Does anybody else have anything else before I read it and call the question? Call the question. Moved by Forbes, seconded by Grigg, that the CAO be instructed to obtain revised cost estimates for Zorra Municipal Center based on square footage not to exceed 20,000 square feet, and to return those revised costs for the August 17th meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And that's just about it. Moved by Grigg, seconded by Forbes, that bylaw 51-22, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of special council held August 4th, 2022, be read a first, second, and third time this August 4th, 2022, and further that the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign the same and affix the corporate seal thereto. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And moved by McDonald, seconded by Mitchell, that this session of special council be now adjourned and herewith closed at, what was that, 9:56? 9:56 a.m. And the next meeting of council be called for the August 17th, 2022 at 9 a.m. in the council chambers at the Township Municipal Office. All those in favor? Opposed?